Well, welcome to the Virtual Insights webinar. I'm Sarah here from Tier 1 and thrilled to kick us off today. Let's get started by seeing who our awesome panelists are. We have Gayle from Salesforce. Gayle, if you want to wave hi. Thank you for joining us. She'll be sharing their story with Sharon, also from Tier 1. And a shout out to all of the team members from Salesforce that have joined us. Also a shout out to all the folks from Optum. We have Tom with us, Director of IT Program Management at Optum, sharing their story with Andy. We also have Jim from Tier 1 facilitating today, and Holly, who is behind the scenes. We've just found that when we're managing virtual events, that producer role is so important, and she is serving that today. And thanks to everyone who's joining us. We are thrilled and hope that you'll gain a lot of insights that you're able to apply to your virtual events. As we have been doing a lot of lately, we do want to call out that some storms have popped up. So we're navigating some of the connectivity. So, bear with us as if we have to be flexible with any of that. And also we wanted to let you know that we are recording the session today. So if you get disconnected or have to drop early, we will definitely be sending that out to all of our registrants. For those of you who aren't familiar with us at Tier 1, we activate strategies through people. So in addition to learning and talent development, that activation often is related to change, transformation, adapting mindsets and ways of working. And it's that adaptability that really led us to create the virtual playbook as a tool. So if you haven't downloaded it, it includes a readiness assessment, the virtual gathering canvas that Gayle and Sharon will be referencing in their story, as well as tools for facilitating and choosing your technology. One last sort of housekeeping piece of information is to save bandwidth. We're going to go off video unless someone is presenting. And then we really would love to see all of your faces. So when we get to the happy hour section, we'll provide the opportunity for you to join by video. So with that, I want to call out someone who has just been incredibly passionate about helping organizations succeed in the virtual space, and that's Jim Ruberg. So he will kick us off. Jim?
Thank you, Sarah. Again, my name is Jim Ruberg, and I'm a learning and OD solution architect here at Tier 1, and I just love helping people connect to really solve the world's problems. And today you'll see here our journey includes a virtual experience, 2 stories, and a happy hour. We'll have a little upfront discussion about creating a virtual experience for impact, and then we'll dive into 2 stories from Salesforce and Optum to see how they've done it. After some Q&A in this large session, we'll break out for happy hour sessions where you can discuss the Salesforce or Optum stories in more depth. So let me begin by sharing how excited I am to be with you all today. In preparing for this webinar, I remembered my very first global WebEx training back in 1999. It was for a Silicon Valley engineering consulting firm, and for many of us, it was the early stages of working in a virtual world. So I've been working virtually for a pretty long time, and yet last year I achieved platinum status on American Airlines, flying around to facilitate working sessions and workshops here in the US, Europe, and Asia. And I have to tell you, based on my experiences working both in the virtual and physical domains, I can truly say that a great virtual experience can be just as good as being in person. It just takes a little more thoughtfulness. Okay, so let's move forward and look at how people perceive a virtual experience. People perceive a virtual experience based on their past experiences and their present awareness shaped by their senses. In past virtual experiences, perhaps there were issues with the technology, maybe it was boring and had a flat design, maybe the facilitator wasn't engaging and it seemed like they were talking like this. So you multitasked or you logged off as soon as you had the chance, right? In the present, as we can see by the research here, our perception is mostly influenced by our eyes and our ears. But let's not forget about all the other senses, right? As you'll learn from the Salesforce story, for example, getting a welcome kit with things that people could physically touch really enhanced that experience. And if you're able to stay on for the happy hour today, the smell, the touch, and the taste of your favorite adult beverage potentially could be the coup d'etat of this virtual experience, especially since we can't have all those super decadent break treats that are often brought in for these in-person gatherings, right? So now before we dive into our client stories, let's look at 3 pictures. For this first picture, I'm interested in what you see. And I'm going to ask you to just type into the chat, or if you have experience using the annotate feature within Zoom, you can use that and you can just annotate right onto the screen. But just take a moment, look at this picture, and tell us what you see. I'm seeing popcorn, dirty planet, coronavirus, Earth surrounded by clouds, COVID, cauliflower virus, pollution, lots of ideas. COVID, of course, so for those that are annotating onto the screen. A dust ball. I think that's similar to what I thought it was originally when I saw it. I referred to it as a globula. So some of you are perhaps being influenced by the recent past where you've seen pictures of the COVID virus. That was not the intention of this picture, but perhaps others didn't bring that memory into their conscious awareness in this present moment. Now, please know there's no judgment either way. We just want to notice and be mindful of what may be influencing our perception. Okay, so that's a little warm-up exercise. Let's take a look at this second picture. So again, I'm interested in what you're perceiving here. Please go back into the chat. Again, or you can annotate directly on the screen. There's some space there, not as much as the prior one. But what do you see going on here? Overwhelmed versus engaged. Overstimulation. Certainly multitasking. Someone's got login issues, potential burnout. One person enjoys virtual, the other one dislikes it. Make it stop versus I'm all in. Different levels of learning. Moving toward focus. Yeah, maybe this person on the left doesn't know how to focus their attention, right? Certainly stress and the bombardment of all the different things that are coming out at us these days can do that, right? So I wonder which one of these individuals you resonate with more. I feel personally like most of the time I'm the person on the right, although I certainly have had times recently where I'm definitely more like the person on the left, and my wife would probably say the opposite. Maybe she sees me more as showing up the way this person is on the left. So it depends on the day. So when we design and deliver virtual experiences, we need to take into account the participant's state of mind, right? What are they bringing into it, that past? And in this example, we might ask ourselves, how might we get someone that comes into our session with the left side state of mind? How do we get them into a place that looks something closer to the right? Okay, I'm going to share one final picture. I'll first mention I'm not going to ask you to specifically comment on what you're seeing here like I did the first 2 pictures. I did, though, before turning things over to Gayle and Sharon to tell the Salesforce story, I just wanted to share how we approach virtual experience design. And this is at a very high level. We use all sorts of tools and methods behind this. But we use this framework to identify the moments that are most important for an individual performer to really step into a new way of being and doing. After identifying situations that may trigger an old pattern of feeling or thinking or doing, we design experiences that provide opportunities to shift those old habits into new ones. And then showing up in this new way creates different and hopefully better outcomes. All right, enough about perception and a model for designing experiences. let's go ahead and hear some stories that provide some insights from the field. And so now I'm going to turn things over to Gayle and Sharon.
Thanks, Jim. Hi, everyone. My name is Gayle Beebe, and I am Director of Leadership Development at Salesforce.
And hey, everybody, I'm Sharon Bowler. I'm a Managing Director at Tier 1 and a Learning Solution Architect. So I supported Gayle in creating the leadership program that you're going to hear about.
She says supported. It was a lot more than support, but here's the story. So I've been with Salesforce for about 6 years and always in learning development. And one thing that Salesforce is known for is its commitment to equality. And one of the metrics we track and publish to the public is the number of women in our technology organization. So in 2018, the percentage of women in the US-based tech org was 24%. And as part of a larger business initiative to grow our women in tech numbers, I called on my friend, Sharon Bowler, to do a redesign of our current women's leadership program that was not providing the value our women leaders saw it, which meant it was not going to help us move that 24% number up. We, of course, wanted to grow the number of women in tech, but we also wanted or needed to prepare the women in tech leaders of tomorrow. Understand what are their challenges, their obstacles, and how can we, the Salesforce organization, provide them the tools and support that they need to be successful. So fast forward, we faced a big challenge with COVID because the in-person connections were such an important part of the program, and the activities were designed to be executed in person. I'm sure many of you, I've read some of the comments in the chat, and many of you faced with that same exact problem. So how do you create that same kind of connection atmosphere when you're virtual? Luckily, I had Tier 1 to tackle that problem.
And I just feel like I need to come in with the cape, Gayle.
Absolutely.
So Gayle kind of mentioned that this was designed with live in mind. You can see we had 5 topics and themes. It was a 6-month program. We had a series of interactive workshops. They were followed by a live meeting of a mentor circle, which was a group of 5 cohort members and 2 mentors, 1 male, 1 female. Then there were one-on-one connections that women were doing in person with other members of their cohort, and individual assignments. We basically kept that same approach, but we had to take all of the interactive workshops and the mentor circles virtual. So if you advance the slide, I could tell you so many wins and lessons learned, but these are the 5 I'm going to talk about, and Gayle is going to elaborate and provide color commentary on. The virtual playbook that Tier 1's distributed talks about 5 E's: entice, enter, engage, exit, and extend. And those support the learning journey. And we put a lot of conscious thought into those. I'm going to show you a few examples. Virtual tools really can replicate live activities with great results if you're thoughtful about how you use them. Timing and pacing are so critical to maintaining that focused attention. I saw in the chat that was one challenge people had, was figuring out, how do I maintain focus and attention? How do I keep people interested? Planning tools are essential for that, really thinking it through and what will work, and then realizing that you're not really trying for perfect, and you don't have to be perfect to be exceptional. So let's go through those, and I'll try and hit on some of the many that I heard you guys in the chat say as challenges. So if we could advance the slide. This first thought was the conscious thought on the 5 E's, and here we're talking about entice and enter. So how do we set the stage for the women? And on the left, you see a picture of the welcome packet, or some of the components of the welcome packet. You can see some tactile things. There's 2 little print cards there that you can see that contained a personalized message from those of us who are facilitating, plus a little cocktail recipe and a supply list if you flipped it over. That really mattered because it took load off the women. They didn't have to print anything. It was just all there for them, laid out. And then we also had an enter activity. So before the program even started, we used a tool called Miro, which many of you may be familiar. There's a lot of collaboration tools out there. And we had them introduce themselves to each other while also practicing using the tool by uploading their picture and putting a little post-it with 5 words that could serve as intros that they would then expand on when we got into the actual workshop. And that worked really, really well. And Gayle, I know you have a thought you want to make about that welcome packet, because we kind of said, no, you really, really need to do this after some initial resistance to doing it.
I was that initial resistance. It was, of course, this is, we were probably only a couple of months into, maybe a month into the COVID response. And it was a pretty tumultuous time, to say the least. I'm sure many of you experienced that as well in that first month, trying to pivot all of your programs. And my initial thought was, this is just one more thing that we have to do. It's an extra cost, it's extra manpower. How can I justify this? Now, coming on the other side of this and hearing the response from the women in the cohort, as well as having a little bit more time to digest the impact of this, and also feeling the pain myself of 100% virtual and losing some connection with people on our bigger team and in our company, that this welcome packet served as a connection point. And so I guess I would say that from my perspective, if you're also one of those decision makers and you think, oh, well, this would be something I would nix, I would caution you to rethink that. And that connection piece is really important, and it really anchors the participant and what they have to do. And also thinking about that they have now the tactile thing, that yes, they could absolutely complete this online, they could be on their computer, they could do it on the PDF, but having the actual printed participant guide is huge for those of us now who are finding ourselves spending 8-9 hours a day sitting in front of the computer meeting after meeting. So this provides some opportunity for the women to step away from their desk, maybe sit in a comfortable chair, or just at least not have to look at their screen the whole time. So it seemed like a small thing, but it really turned into a really big thing.
Moving on, still on the 5 E's, engage. This was another comment I saw in the chat about your biggest challenges were keeping people focused, keeping people interested. The spice of life, if you will, is variety. And so we really paced it between the online and the offline, in the large group and the small group, very intentionally. So sometimes we engage them visually with video. Then they had the reflection, as Gayle pointed out, that they could sit in a comfy chair and do some self-reflection on what they were seeing or hearing. And then we brought them into Miro for a live discussion and a way to manage that. We had 30-some women in the virtual session. It was a lot. By allowing them each to find their voice on the Post-it, and then we could call on 2 or 3 to elaborate, it enabled us to involve everyone. And it worked very, very well. This is just one example, one activity of what we did, but it showed engage very strongly. If I move on to the next slide, exit. Finding a graceful way to exit when you're all virtual and there is no live is hard, in managing that in a space. And we're going to use Mentimeter here in a minute. But giving them the ability to just type 1 to 3 words on what the day was for them. That became a very rich activity. It only took us 60 seconds for them to do it. And then we could just choose some of the words and say, would someone who said insightful care to share? And I got some really rich conversation out of that in a very quick time frame. So it's a great way to do it. Moving on to the next wins, extend. Such a critical part in a multi-month program. How are you going to reinforce and extend the learning that happened in the workshop? So this is actually the great news. It's not a piece we didn't have to change a whole lot. We already had extension activities in the live event. So the biggest thing we had to do was convert the mentoring circles, which were happening live, to Google Hangouts. And that was actually a very democratic thing to do, because it enabled women from all across the country to participate equally. So that's been a positive contribution to the program and food for thought as we go forward. Next slide. So the second big win was virtual tools replicating live activities. in my opinion, sometimes with even better results. So this is an example of a visualization activity we had people do. They were working together in teams in the live workshop to draw a great leader on flip charts after kind of brainstorming traits. It was very interesting to me to see how this translated into the virtual. And you can see here, these are drawings that the women made in Miro. And I actually felt like they got more reflective in this manner and had a better time doing it than when they did it live. And it was a favorite activity in the live workshops. So if you just rethink it a little bit, you can figure out how to replicate it. Next slide. Timing and pacing are huge. And I included the agendas on the slide so you can see those breaks, because it's so important to know that we honored those literally. It didn't matter if we were running a little ahead or a little behind in the program. They knew that that time spot on the clock was when they were going on to a break. And we ensured that there was no time period where we went past 90 minutes before taking a break. If it was a 90-minute block of time where we were live, then we made sure it was a 30-minute break so that they could step away and do something different. And even within those time blocks, there were ample self-reflection activities, et cetera, so they got to go off camera and get in that comfy chair, to Gayle's point, and do a reflection activity that didn't require FaceTime. To do that, it means that if you want to replicate 100% and not delete anything, you're going to have to extend your time. And we did that by spanning our first session from 1 day to 2 that went for about 5 and 5.5 hours with those breaks built in. Gayle, anything on that one that you wanted to add?
Yeah, we've had to redesign all of our live programs to be virtual. And we have found what you just said, that it is whatever you had in person, it really is almost double to turn it into virtual. And also calling back to, I know there were some comments in the chat about engagement and also pacing. And I think the pacing also helps with the engagement, because you're not having people be on camera for 2 hours at a time. It's just too much. And so it's not just the activities you build, but it's also the breaks that you give the people so that they can go off camera and feel like they're actually getting a mental and physical break from that. So, and this has worked really well for our other programs.
I'm seeing some questions about, well, how did you break it up? So you might see in a 40-minute span there, where we do an introduction of a concept, we set up an activity. That might take 5 minutes or 7 minutes. Then they might go into that small group activity for 25 minutes. We come back and we debrief it for another 10 to 15. So it's very paced to vary quite a lot to give a lot of that principle of difference and change. Next slide. Planning tools are essential, and I want to call attention to the tool on the right there as much as anything. That was a tech producers list of, we had 3 people supporting the sessions. So there were 2 facilitators plus a technical producer, and that was critical, in my opinion, to the success and flow of the entire program. Our technical producer, Kristen Nimmer, was outstanding in her ability to keep things moving, to push out links, bring up screens, do whatever. So that was really useful to her to have those show notes, if you will, of what she needed to do when. And then on the left, we took the time when we were converting this to really think through the redesign and the pacing and the timing, and to do basically a mini design document before we actually modified the materials. And that was super helpful. And our 5th and final big win plus lesson learned is that exceptional experience could be achieved when we were by far not perfect. We had our little snafus and bloops going through it. But you can see from the feedback from the cohort on each day of the first session, which we had, their feedback was very positive. They loved it. And in fact, one woman said, I've been through a lot of these live as well as virtual. This is by far the best. And Gayle, I know you had some feedback on that one as well.
Yeah, this is exactly what we wanted to see. We wanted to see engaging and insightful, because we felt like those 2 words meant a lot to us as far as what we thought the chances are now that the women would be able to apply what they've learned on the job, because they found it engaging, they found it insightful, and it would be something that would be motivating for them to add it to their bag of tricks and be able to grow as a leader.
All right, so now for the snafus, because we did have a few snags and challenges, all of which we worked through. The welcome packets were a fantastic idea. You got to know that the U.S. mail is not 100%. As much as I love the U.S. mail, I want to support it. So if I had it to do over again, I would have sent them a week earlier than we did. We allowed 2 weeks. I would have allowed a little bit more because it would have given us time to resend. We had 4 people out of 60 some that did not get their packets. We had a lot of early confusion over which tool to use, and it matters. So thinking through and knowing earlier what tool is very helpful. And I know every company was in the same boat. So that is not a ding on Salesforce at all. It was, to Gayle's credit, she gave the thumbs up to Zoom when she saw the troubles we were having with some of the other tools. Tech issues are going to happen, so your timing has to allow for that. We had to adjust a little bit because we underestimated some of the little small tech bumps that were going to happen. So be prepared for it. Be prepared for your folks not to read or follow directions when they're given, and to allow more time. Cognitive load is so high in these women. I would say 80% of them had small children that were somewhere in their house that they were managing as well. Be thoughtful about that. We definitely assumed the persona on the left from where Jim was showing early and designed for that. And I think that served us well. Have a disaster plan. Seriously, someone's internet went out right before the program was supposed to start. It was our tech producer. And it was like, oh my goodness, who can play that role if she can't be on? So that's our story in a nutshell. We're excited to talk a little bit more about it at happy hour, and I'll monitor the chat as we go off to see if I can answer questions. Gayle, any final thoughts from you?
No, other than that, I know that someone asked what is the timeline for this, and yes, it did push this out. We were supposed to launch in June, and we ended up launching in July. But it was an incredibly fast turnaround, and we were on it pretty much even before we actually locked down. So we had to make some decisions very quickly.
All right, thank you all. So we'd like to enter in with a poll question now, and you can see on the screen, we're going to use a tool called Menti. If you haven't used Mentimeter before, you can go to menti.com. You can pull that up on your phone or in a separate web browser. We do have the QR code on here. If you've got your QR scanner handy, it will take you right into the survey. Or if or when you go into menti.com, you can just type in 279224, and it will take you to these questions that I'll share as well. In terms of what's your biggest concern about converting an in-person experience into virtual? All right, we've got almost 50 responses. Let's give another moment here. It's looking like we may have a clear, I don't know, winner is the right word, but so pretty even on the time required to make it happen and the skill needed and the people needed to make it happen. But the significant majority here are really concerned about the loss of impact. I know Gayle and Sharon, you talked about this a little bit, whether it be, that loss of impact and we looked at kind of the word clouds of how people experience it both sort of in person and virtually. Interested in how you perceive these results relative to your experience on the women's program.
Jim, I would say that I think the women themselves were troopers for being willing to continue with the program, but they were all very nervous. And we heard a lot of positive feedback on, wow, this was so much better than I thought it could be. And I really like this. And it's been an amazing experience so far. I think that our strategic use of the cameras helped that as well. And we also did a happy hour with the women to help them connect. And we did small group connecting points. We had some networking activities that help where we put them in pairs and trios. So we did several things to help facilitate that face-to-face and keep them engaging with each other.
Great. Can you talk a little bit more about how you're measuring the impact of this program? And then how that may have differed if it shifted by going to the virtual approach?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So we have not changed our metrics on this just because it is virtual. The goal is to, of course, grow these leaders. We want to get feedback from their managers that they are progressing. We have a set of great leader characteristics for Salesforce. And we actually mapped, when we first designed this program, we mapped all the content to some of those great leader characteristics. And so we're still measuring on that. Do these women, do they feel like they are able to apply the skills that they've learned? We are still measuring the same things.
Great. Thank you. So let's go to the Optum story. Let's have Tom and Andy give them a little more introduction of themselves, please.
All right, thanks, Jim. Hi, everybody. This is Tom Muehlbauer. I'm a Director of IT Program Management and Training for Optum, specifically in our Optum Technology Learning Department, which is called Optum Tech University.
And I'm Andy Erickson, Senior Technology Solutions Consultant at Tier 1. I serve as a tech strategist for a number of our clients and have partnered with Tom and his team at Optum Tech University for a number of years on a program we're going to get into called Dev Days.
Yeah, so as Andy says, we're here to talk to you today about Dev Days. Optum Tech University puts on about 10 events throughout the calendar year. Dev Days being the flagship event, not only for Optum Tech University, but the flagship event for all of Optum Technology. It started back in 2013 with a small gathering of developers, and essentially that's where it got its name. It was strictly only for developers at that time. So Dev Days came from the name Developer Days, so that's how it's got its name. But now it has transformed and expanded into an event for all of software engineering roles within Optum Technology. How it works, it's a 3-day conference bringing everyone together, mostly in person, to essentially learn about all the latest and greatest technologies that is happening currently throughout Optum, and also future technologies that's happening throughout Optum. Network with one another face to face. A lot of these people don't get together very often. They're often remote. So bringing them all together in one place to be able to network and meet in person is a great advantage of the event. And then also innovate on ideas, not only that they have, but they're also learning about at the conference during the 3 days. Last year, to use as an example, we had a main one-time in-person event of about 500 attendees that we flew in from all over the world. These were 500 of the top technologists within Optum Technology who came together for one event, one 3-day event at Minneapolis. So then we expanded that event to satellite events throughout the entire Optum Technology organization at different sites. So the idea being that we brought these 500 people, took the ideas and the different technology messages that they learned about at the 3-day main event, brought them back to their teams and their respective sites and passed on that message to the entire organization, trying again to then reach as many people within Optum Tech as possible. So in the end, last year as an example, again, we reached about 5,000 people, but during that time, it took about 3 to 4 months to get all of that done and all those messages out to everybody. If we can go to the next slide, please. So enter COVID. So obviously with all of us being here and all of the different opportunities we have, COVID gave us what I call an opportunity to go virtual. So like the Salesforce example, we had to delay our event. We were originally scheduled for June as well, but we delayed that to November to give us time to plan a great event for all of the technologists. One big difference from last year's event of the 500 person in-person event is the amount of people. since we were going virtual, we thought, why not? Let's go all in. Let's invite everyone within Optum Technology, which is about 20,000 people, if you include our offshore partners as well. We're not expecting all of those 20,000 people to attend, but we're expecting anywhere from about 5 up to 10,000 people to attend the event at once. And then similar to what Salesforce is saying, in that they had to essentially double the amount of time that it took for the event. As I said before, it was been traditionally a 3-day event. We've decided to make it a 6-day event over 2 weeks. And during those 6 days, it'll be just half days. So 4 hours each day for 6 days instead of 3 full days. And thus we can reach that many people. Instead of taking it 4 months, we can reach up to 10,000 people, we're thinking, just over 2 weeks.
A virtual conference requires rethinking our success characteristics somewhat. First of all, there's this need for relevant and compelling content. As a conference organizers, that's our responsibility, working with our subject matter experts to get into the hands of our attendees things that they really want to learn about. Then there's this component of building an engaging experience. In person, we can control virtually everything that happens and ensure a great experience for our attendees. In a virtual world, we don't necessarily have the experience of doing that, and we have to partner with somebody who can help us build an engaging experience to keep both the intention and the enthusiasm of our attendees during the event. As part of our thinking and reflecting off of the in-person event, we needed to understand and think about what would make sense in terms of an experience in a virtual world. And some of those evaluation criteria include a high fidelity event space, and you're going to see an example of that in a few minutes. Our presenters, our subject matter experts, need to be able to share PowerPoints, share their screen, stream video, and display webcam image of themselves. Because there's a need for engagement and interactivity, the presenters have to be able to poll their audiences, and the audience themselves has to be able to respond to these polls and ask questions of the presenters. We're looking for a platform that can provide gamification. As we cross 3 to 6 days of conference activity, how do we keep somebody engaged not only from session to session, but across that 2-week span of time? And if we can find a platform that integrates gamification into that experience, it allows us to do things like that. We also want to understand what our attendees are doing and how they're doing them, doing those things. A platform that provides tracking and reporting will help us out there. Then there's the nuts and bolts of hey, we've got 30 sessions, 15 workshops, keynote addresses by executives. We're going to need some technical help, some manpower, building out what this virtual experience looks like. And when we're holding the event itself, tech support during that event for when things happen and when things go wrong. Finally, as the event's going on, how much bandwidth, how much throughput can this platform handle to make sure that we give everybody the experience that they're looking for? So thinking about those characteristics of the platform, Tom, do you have any comments about how your evaluation process went?
Yeah, so what we did is picked and analyzed 10 different platforms that we were aware of or at least had heard of, and went through pretty much a rapid fire series of events over a 2-week time frame, reaching out to each respective company and trying to schedule demos or get any information as quickly as possible from each one of those 10 companies. For the most part, all of them were very receptive, and we were able to get demos, and then went through, as Andy outlined here, all of the different criteria and made sure they could meet each one of these criteria as we went through each of the presentations and demo. So then what we are eventually landing on is the next slide. We actually have landed on the platform and are now partnering with a company called LABROOTS. And in addition to meeting all the criteria from the previous slide, the things that stood out for us for LABROOTS were several different features. One is the interface itself. As you can see, here are a couple different examples of the lobby that a person would enter into once they get to the event. So we wanted to give the person the event, even though they're sitting at home at their computer attending the event, we want to give them the impression that they're walking into a hotel lobby or they're walking into a business session lobby and they're actually present and have the different signage, the different arrows and signs pointing them which ways they can go for the different respective activities happening at the event. So the interface, we thought, quite frankly, was cool. And we still think that, and LabRoots is being very respectful and very flexible and offering the different flexible options to get it to the way we want it to look. Also, the gamification, as Andy mentioned, is another big reason why we went with LabRoots. As Salesforce mentioned, and as we're mentioning, the engagement piece is the big piece and a big challenge. And we don't want, during downtimes, breaks, we just don't want black screen of nothing happening. We want activity happening at all times. So LabRoots offers different things like trivia, scavenger hunts, different photo opportunities that people can post to the site, networking options that people can go into the different rooms and chat. It offers constant activity, which is one thing that we hope will keep everyone engaged for. And then the other two big things are the development support. So we're working with LabRoots daily and helping us build out the event, and they do all the building per our guidance. And then they also will offer tech support while the event is happening. So again, this is two examples of the lobby. To go to the next slide.
And here's what a presenter interface towards an attendee would look like. And you can see here, the presenter is on webcam, displaying their PowerPoints, talking through their presentation in real time. The attendees can ask questions. What you don't see here, but is also available, are poll options for the presenter to ask questions of the audience and gather responses, so they can respond to different dynamics within their own attendees at that session in real time. And my dog is barking. That's the presenter experience. Next slide.
So this is another look at a different room. Again, the previous slide that Andy showed was a breakout session, and that they can click into from the main lobby. And this is the auditorium, an example of an auditorium view that they can also click into from the lobby. We can instruct per the agenda, everyone go to the agenda now, and they go to this, and then up there we will have a presenter on a video screen giving a live presentation. So these are all examples of just some of the interface that LabRoots offers, and this is one of the primary reasons why we went with them. So if we go to the next screen, challenges with all of this. Obviously, with up to 10,000 people, we needed to have a platform that could support it, and LabRoots gives us that. But obviously, we're going to have to be doing a lot of testing and a lot of load testing leading up to it to make sure that it in fact can handle that many people. They have had experience handling that many people, so we just want to do a lot of testing to make sure that it does in fact work and work well. A short runway to November. There's a lot to build out. During the Dev Days presentation, we're going to have up to 30 different topics being presented at many different times, 30 different topics, as well as 18 different workshops being presented at different times throughout the event. So there's a lot to build out and a short time to do it. So that's obviously a big challenge, getting it interfaced into the LabRoots platform. And then we know that tech issues will happen. We're aware of that. So having not only the expertise from our side, but also from the LabRoots side ready to react as soon as those things happen. On the attendee experience, that's another challenge, and that's the big thing that we want to make sure that the attendees are walking away from this year's Dev Days thinking, hey, that was cool, that was a lot of fun, and it was noteworthy and worth my time spending that much time learning about the different technologies happening within Optum. So I want to make sure that they're coming in and the presenters are prepped and offering very interactive sessions throughout the entire event. And then again, making sure that we have active engagement opportunities for all of the attendees to be active as possible, because we know, as we all know, working at home, there's going to be distractions, and the ability to multitask is very easy. So we want to keep them engaged as much as possible throughout the entire 6 days.
Tom, thanks so much for that overview of the story of Optum and Dev Days. To wrap up the big events piece of this this talk, I'd like to provide one other option. It's not nearly as polished as one of the platforms like LabRoots that's purpose built for these big event conferences kind of experiences. Microsoft Live Events does give you an option to spin up, you know, whenever you want to spin up a real-time, on-demand conference for 10,000 people, you can press a couple buttons and get one. It gives you a reasonable interface where you can webcast out to your audience and take questions through a chat session and do some collaboration there. So if you're looking for something quick and easy, as it couples the Yammer, the Microsoft Stream, and Microsoft Teams platforms together to build out a live event platform. And I really mention this because Tier 1 has quite a bit of experience in the Microsoft Teams suite and this live events paradigm. In addition, I want to remind everybody one more time that to get our virtual playbook, you'll see a link in the chat here. Feel free to click that link and go grab that before we're done here. And Jim, I'll hand it back to you, I believe now.
Thanks, Andy. I'm actually going to go back to our question from earlier about your biggest concern about converting in-person experience into virtual, and we looked at some of this data with Sharon and Gayle, and I'm interested in your all's reaction to this, right? So I won't jump ahead because I'm intrigued, particularly about one of the aspects here. But when you see this, how does this relate to some of the challenges, again, as you revisit what you guys are going through right now?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it makes sense. The loss of impact is certainly the most important thing and the most important concern. Obviously, the interface, the LabRoots interface that we showed you is cool, but it's only cool for so long, as long as all the technology works, and then obviously the content is the key. And if the content is lacking and not relevant, then the loss of impact is going to be prevalent throughout the organization, or throughout the whole entire event. But for me, I think from my perspective, there should be another answer on here that's all of the above, because for me, all of these things apply. And if one suffers, one of these four areas suffer, the entire event's going to suffer. So they're all important.
And I'll piggyback off of Tom's comment about content and importance and loss of impact. One of the things we did do in order to mitigate some of those issues is poll the population and take really a call for papers. What are the most interesting topics you'd like to bring forward? And we received about 100 submissions and pared that down to 30, which we believe that the entire Optum Tech engineering group would want to hear about. And second, unlike, say, compliance training or something that is required and mandated in a conference event like this, the goal, the hope is that the people really want to be there. So they will stay engaged because they're learning stuff they want to hear about.
Yeah. So I heard that in terms of really, again, the purpose, one of the key purposes around networking, connecting, and ideally innovating. And obviously it's different in the virtual space. I'm also interested if you can dig a little bit more into the time required to make it happen. Did you, in effect, start planning for this at the same time as you would have if it would have been in person? Or can you talk a bit about how that compares to traditionally how you've, in the past, designed for this type of program?
As far as Dev Day is concerned, we started planning about the same time frame leading up to the event. However, once we decided to go virtual, then that just reset the clock on everything essentially, and that decision to go virtual is about a month ago. We and I would say probably 2 or 3 months ago, we were planning as if it was going to be in person. We had at first delayed it, still thinking it was going to be in person, and then we were still planning as if it was going to be in person. But then little by little, we started getting, keeping track of the COVID trends throughout the world. In addition to the tendencies in our organization, we started realizing that, okay, we need to start building a contingency plan of if in fact we are going virtual. And then it quickly, that contingency plan went to plan A. We are going virtual. So with that, now the time frame is crunched, and essentially we're having to reinvent the way we present this stuff rather than being in person, with a much shortened runway than we have in the past.
Jim, may I make a comment about a question that came up in the chat?
Please.
Okay, and it's also with respect to the purple skill people needed to make it happen. Someone asked, how do you prepare the presenters for an environment like this? And we have thought a lot about that. First of all, like many of you on the calls, you probably have instructional designers working with your subject matter experts. We do also, and they're working through building out their content on a timeline that gets them done in the late September timeframe, so that we've got another month to do walkthroughs of their content with them offline to make sure they feel comfortable with it, and then a real-time walkthrough with them in the platform itself, so that they get comfortable with the bells and whistles of the platform. Most of our subject matter experts are pretty confident in the area of where they've got expertise and can talk about this stuff off the cuff. We need them to not just do that, but to also engage with their audience because of this virtual nature. So they're going to have to integrate polls and questions into their presentations themselves. Some of our presenters are comfortable showing up at the last minute with a deck, and I would get that in an in-person experience. This time around, we're going to work with them and basically force them, hey, you got to work with us and get done by this date so we can get you into this platform and get you trained up on it.
Great insights. Thank you. I also, before we kind of go back and look at sort of a comprehensive set of questions, I'm going to go to that loss of impact question again, and if you can share with the audience how you all have measured impact in the past, and how that may differ from here, or how you're focusing your efforts to ensure that you have just as much impact as a in-person approach.
How we typically measure our impact and how we're doing for the event is by Net Promoter Score, or NPS score. And that has been our primary measurement on how we did for the event, in addition to we'll have an NPS score for the event overall, and then for each one of the breakout sessions presented by each one of the presenters, they will each again have their own NPS score for each one of their events. And that's how we've done in the past, and that's how we will measure it again, because the tool and what we want to make sure happens is at the end of each breakout session, each one of the attendees attending will take just a quick survey, essentially ranking how they thought the session was, its effectiveness, and giving it that NPS score.
Great, thank you. So now I'm going to shift back over here a little bit, and what we've been doing in the background here is, I think, collecting some of the other questions from the, let me pull this over. I've been collecting some of the other questions from the chat, but I'm interested, if I go back to Sharon and Gayle real quick, any other reflections that come up as you heard Tom and Andy talk about, a much larger event, a much larger gathering with some of the considerations they're working through right now, and comparing that to, on a smaller scale, but any additional insights that you'd want to share with the audience here?
I would just say that they're very, very different. I don't know that I would sit there and think of the same design challenges in the same way. When you're managing on a large scale and people's expectations for some of those things, I think I think of the large scale presentation a little bit like what we're doing here this afternoon, quite frankly, Jim. And there is much less interaction between people, except through the chat, than what we did in the smaller scale training session, where we're actually trying to build skills. So thinking through purpose and what you're intending for people to get out of it kind of dictates part of the experience. So that's, Gayle, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so we have some larger events that we've put on, and there are certain tools that you can only use when you have 10,000 plus people, or you can only use certain types of tools, and those tools may or may not have a chat feature. So it is more, the bigger it is, the less interaction there is, at least from our experience. Now, we are, Salesforce is going virtual with our yearly conference, customer conference with Dreamforce. So that is on our minds. How are we going to interact with our customers? And there will certainly be large scale events that will have little interaction, and then we'll use a different tool to do smaller interactions so that you can make it more personal.
Great, thank you. So one of the questions I'd love to pull forward here that we've seen in the chat is about sort of US versus global participation. And I'm interested for Sharon and Gayle, for you guys to clarify sort of, I think this initially was in US, but you can clarify that and what the intentions are for more of a global audience. And then Andy and Tom, if you can talk as well about how you're taking kind of global audience participation into account as you work through these types of events and activities.
I can start. We did design this for the North America audience. And since then, we've had, actually someone in chat did ask this question, and I responded that we have had conversations about taking this program to EMEA and APAC. And, but there are cultural considerations that we would need to make modifications to the program to make sure that we're hitting the mark for our internal customers. And it's not something that we're not moving on it quite yet. There's still a lot of work to be done, but it's something that we've been talking about. So there are cultural considerations and also technology considerations in those other countries. Specifically, we have an office in Hyderabad, India, and their internet is not, and power is not consistent like it is here. So there are lots of considerations.
I will say, Jim, we have successfully, not with Salesforce, but with other clients who have an international presence, we've used some of these tools. Miro specifically is an example of a tool that we've been able to successfully use. And it's very helpful that they beta a feature where you don't have to require people to set up an account to use it, where you can provide a link to them as a guest, and it helps a lot with the security issues. But it does take a lot of thought. It's not going to be, oh, you can do it here, you can do it anywhere.
Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, from our perspective for Dev Days, traditionally how the event has run has been, we've had the US-based event, and then as I mentioned, we had the satellite offices then in the next several months after that. One of the several of the satellite offices were our offshore accounts over in India primarily. So with this, again, it's another opportunity. We thought, let's bring it all together and let's do it all at the same time. So instead of having the separate event for our offshore accounts over in India, we're going to do it all at the same time. Obviously with that means a huge time zone difference, and that's the primary challenge that we're addressing right now. And we're essentially building the event to take all of the different time zones into account. So for the most part, we're starting around 8:30 a.m. in Central Time here in the US, which we know is around 5:36 or so over in India. But at the same time, throughout the event, we will be starting maybe at like 4 in the morning or maybe even sooner to be able to replay certain breakout sessions and keynote speeches for our partners over in India. So they're essentially having the same experience, and it's all happening at the same time. So it's not only going to be just half days here in the US for the people running the event, it's going to probably be more like full days, but just for different audiences based on where everyone is sitting.
Tom, I would add, we've done not on this Salesforce project, but we have done that where we've run some sessions with other clients, and it's exactly what we've done. Is the facilitators were up and presenting at 4 a.m. local time so that they could deliver an optimal experience across the world.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
what we'll be doing.
Yeah, good old times and challenges.
Everybody gets double pay.
So another question I want to bring forward is around, sort of plan A, plan B, plan C, right? So maybe you got, this is the way we're going to ideally do it. This is sort of our backup plan, and this is sort of then our disaster contingency plan. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you went about planning for sort of those backup and contingency plans, and whether it be Sharon, how that actually played out at the Salesforce event, or Tom and Andy, as you guys are thinking about for the event in November?
I will just say ours are still emerging. So some that we really worked out, and for me, it's a huge comfort to have 2 partners on every session. So there's 3 of us. That's one big contingency for us. Another silly one that seems, I guess, kind of low tech at this point is the use of our cell phones. So starting a running thread on a text message so that we can always be in constant communication with each other and not rely on the internet for that communication really matters. Back up to the internet, and that essentially means you've got to have a hotspot available to you. Having a hard wire to your computer as opposed to relying on just Wi-Fi, so that you, if you have poor connectivity through your Wi-Fi, you can hardwire and get much better connectivity. So those are 4 really simple examples. Local versions of all the materials, so that if somebody's computer goes down, somebody else can swap out and deliver a link or whatever needs to be delivered. So those are 5 quick tips.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah, those are all great tips from Sharon. I'll add on to that, same from our perspective. There's one, the technology piece, and that is, as we talked about, the LABROOTS tool. And if for some reason that were to not work or break down, we could potentially go to one of our existing tools, that is like WebEx or Microsoft Teams or something like that, and trying to figure out how we would quickly adapt over to that or one of those tools if for some reason our main tool in LABROOTS goes down. And another piece, as far as the actual event presentation itself, we're trying to make this event, again, as if you're attending a live event. So we want as many of the presentations to be live and be able to take questions and go in that regard. But as a backup option, we are considering having all of these presentations recorded previously, just in the case if for some reason one of the presenters, like Sharon was saying, is their internet goes down or something happens where the technology breaks down, we have a recorded version of that presentation that we can quickly just load up and start running, and they'll still get the same experience, but just not live. And in most cases, at sometimes they can even tell, or not even tell, that it's recorded, it appears live. Mm-hmm. So those are different ways we're trying to go about those backup plans.
Great, very comprehensive. So I'm going to ask one more question before we maybe transition a little bit. And I'm interested in getting both these stories. What's sort of the most unique or innovative or engaging approach that you feel like you took, Sharon and Gayle, and Tom and Andy, that you're really excited about, that whether it be a generic sort of design approach, or was this specific activity, or how you utilize some of these virtual technologies in creating an experience? What's sort of the one really, call it cool, call it exciting approach that you'd want to share with the audience here today?
I'd like to share a tool, and that's the Miro board. That was a real game changer, not just for this program, but for several other programs. And we actually use it in our team meetings now. We have a very large learning team, and we're able to use that to collaborate and connect. So it's really been a game changer for our team.
Do you mind sharing a little bit more, Gayle, about the Miro board for maybe folks that haven't used it before, and maybe a specific example of how you are using it?
Yeah, so we actually did a connection activity last week for our team, and it was, you're able to, essentially, it's a flip chart, but in virtual. And so you're able to, each person could have their own Post-it, and we were able to, what we did, we just listed 3 things that we were grateful for. And so each person could see that, and then the whole team could see that in real time. And that's just, I mean, it's just a way to collaborate. And now we're using that for lots of other programs, so that what you would normally do in a flip chart, or you would do like at your table, where you would kind of contribute to one big thing, we're able to do that now in Miro. You can add graphics, post-its, you can add just text boxes. There's, you can just draw on it. It really has, there's a slew of templates, so it can help with strategy planning and so much more. Absolutely, yeah. Sharon just put the link in there. It really has been a game changer for us.
That's great. Thank you, Gayle.
And Jim, it would be, even though we're using some really cool technology with Dev Days, I think the most exciting aspect of the Dev Days event is how we're able to structure the content now that we have an opportunity to address, upwards of 20,000 people. The way we thought about content is day one, we're going to take Optum Tech's strategic priorities and address those across the audience. Day two, we're going to survey the executives in the Optum Tech organization and understand which sessions that we're planning pertain just to those segments, and build out a custom agenda handmade for each one of those groups, so that those CEOs of those different groups of CIOs can understand that their group's needs are going to be addressed. And then third, our day three of our breakout sessions, we got an opportunity to meet the needs of the individual software engineers by providing some really interesting content, sort of in an elective model they can choose to go to based on their own interests. So we're going to meet the needs of the enterprise strategically, each of the lines of business, and then the developers on a case-by-case basis.
Very nice.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd echo Andy's comments and just add on the fact that for me, in addition to those exciting points that Andy's talking about, it's just the true breadth of how many people we're reaching. It was always our challenge year after year, is to get this message and of all these different technologies and innovations out to as many people within Optum Tech as possible. So now to be able to do that in one shot to the entire organization is very exciting.
That's
So
great.
now we just got to make it happen.
Yeah, indeed. We'll have to do this again with you after the first of the year.
Right.
All right, so I am going to ask, I'm going to go around one more time to the panelists and just kind of share any final reflections, within the story that you've talked about, or for the audience as they're thinking about developing sort of virtual learning experiences or leadership development experiences. Sharon and Gayle, just kind of words of wisdom, tips, advice, kind of final thoughts, and then Andy and Tom, kind of final reflections for those that are planning sort of larger gatherings, what you would want the audience to definitely take away as key insights from today.
For me, it is find your experts and take their advice. Start with something small. Don't think you have to put every bell and whistle into a program. Make it meaningful, and then practice, practice, practice.
Thank you, Gayle.
I'll follow Gayle since we're aligned on the same program. I love the practice, practice, practice. It's something we didn't talk about. Well, we did dry runs, and those were invaluable in finding the bumps in our road, and something that seemed like a great idea when we designed it out. And then when we actually executed it, we could say, oh, that's going to take too much time, or that's going to be awkward, or there's a simpler way of doing it. So I would echo that. And I would also echo and underscore time. You will spend time, if you want to do a good job, you're going to spend a lot of time designing this and thinking it through, and then thinking through the time to execute and the time for the participants. It's just the whole concept of time, and everywhere you need to be thinking about it.
Thank you.
For me, it would be the discipline that we know how to apply to an in-person event is different from the discipline to do a large virtual conference, and we're learning that on the fly. But we understand that it's going to take the same amount of discipline and no less time, maybe even more time, to plan a virtual conference that's engaging for the attendees.
Yeah. Tom, your thoughts, final reflections.
I couldn't agree more with Sharon and Gayle on the practice. That's one big change that we have put into place in terms of our planning, is trying to put in a lot of time up front as far as dry runs and practicing, and make sure all of the presenters not only know how to work with the tool, but know how to adjust their presentations to make them more interactive and engaging. And we'll be providing a lot of feedback to them. And then in addition is the coaching of these presenters too is a big piece. We always used to do in the past, just essentially giving them feedback on how their presentation skills are going. But now it's a whole different world, and how we coach all of these folks on presenting to a virtual audience. When there's no one in front of you, it changes everything. You can't see the nonverbal communication from your audience sitting there. You don't hear them laughing at your jokes or anything like that. It's very difficult, and you have to adjust how you present. And that's some of the coaching that we're going to have to not only do for ourselves, but for all of the many presenters that we have.
Great. Well, thank you again to all of our panelists. I know, again, for those of you that can stay on for the happy hours, we're going to have individual breakout rooms here. We'll post in a moment, and you can dig deeper with either Tom and Andy, or Sharon and Gayle, or even jump on with Sarah and me if you want to learn more about Tier 1. But I did want to give Sarah a moment to talk about XLearn here before we provide the other details for the happy hour.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And another just virtual clap for Gayle, Tom, Sharon, and Andy for sharing their stories. XLearn is another one of those events that has had a lot of pivots this year, but we are scheduled to have it virtually October 6th through 15th. And you can sign up to receive updates, but we'll actually include that link in the follow-up email with the recording from today. So you'll have that. And then also, as we mentioned, we will be having happy hour, but for those of you that aren't able to join for that, thanks again for joining for today's presentation. Feel free to reach out to us if you want to talk about anything. This does wrap up the formal part of the presentation.